The air hung heavy with the scent of sweat and anticipation as the small town gym buzzed with excitement. It was 8 p.m. on a chilly Friday night in Willow Creek, a sleepy Midwestern hamlet nestled between endless cornfields and a sluggish river that reflected the dim glow of a single diner sign. The closest thing to nightlife in this forgotten corner of the world. The gym itself was a relic of tougher times, its walls peeling with faded posters of past champions whose names had long been forgotten, their black and white faces staring out from cracked frames. The floor bore the scars of countless battles, scuffed wood polished by the soles of stomping boots, marked with faint chalk outlines of rings past. The air was thick, a pungent mix of exertion, stale beer, and the faint metallic tang of blood from fights gone by. At the heart of it all stood the ring, a weathered square of canvas stretched taut over creaking wooden boards, its ropes sagging slightly under the weight of history, as if weary from holding up the dreams and defeats of those who'd stepped inside. A single overhead bulb swung gently on its frayed cord, casting long, jagged shadows that danced across the faces of the 100 or so spectators crammed into the space. Farmers in worn overalls, factory workers with calloused hands, and a scattering of teenagers sneaking glances at their phones. The murmur of their voices, a gravelly chorus of shouts, excited whispers, and the occasional clink of a beer bottle, rose into a crescendo as the announcer's voice crackled through a battered microphone, its static slicing through the din like a knife. The man, a wiry figure with a graying mustache and a stained shirt, leaned into the mic with a theatrical flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event of the night. In the red corner, undefeated with 12 knockouts, the reigning local champion, Derek Walsh." The crowd erupted, a tidal wave of cheers and stomping feet shaking the rickety bleachers that groaned under the pressure. Derek stepped forward, a towering figure at 6'3", his muscles bulging beneath a sheen of sweat that caught the light in a way that made him look almost otherworldly. His shaved head gleamed with confidence, the scar above his left eyebrow, a trophy from his last fight, adding to his aura of invincibility. He raised a gloved fist, the red leather glinting under the bulb, and the roar that followed seemed to rattle the very foundation of the old building, loosening a trickle of dust from the rafters. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, silence fell. A sudden, almost eerie hush that rippled through the room like a stone dropped into still water. The announcer cleared his throat, his voice dropping to a curious, almost skeptical tone. "And in the blue corner, Sarah Miller." The name hung in the air, met with a collective blink of confusion, followed by a ripple of uneasy laughter. From the shadows at the edge of the ring emerged a small figure, her slight frame barely filling out the oversized fight gear that hung loosely on her shoulders, the blue fabric swaying with each tentative step. At 5 feet tall and weighing no more than 120 pounds, Sarah looked more like a lost spectator than a fighter, her presence an anomaly in a space built for brute strength. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face that bore no trace of fear, only a quiet intensity in her brown eyes as they swept over the crowd with a steady, unyielding gaze. The spectators exchanged glances, their initial surprise giving way to snickers and muffled laughter. A burly man in the front row, his overalls streaked with grease, elbowed his friend, a lanky teenager with a cap pulled low, and muttered, "She's going to get flattened in 5 seconds. Another, a woman with a beer in hand and a cigarette dangling from her lips, chuckled and whispered a bet to her companion, her voice carrying just enough to draw a few more smirks. The odds were clear. No one gave her a chance, and the air thickened with their collective doubt. Derek turned to face her, his lips curling into a smirk that revealed a glint of amusement in his cold blue eyes, the scar above his brow twitching as he sized her up. He towered over her, his shadow swallowing her tiny form as he cracked his knuckles with a deliberate, echoing pop that seemed to punctuate the silence. "What's this, a warm-up act?" he taunted, his voice a deep rumble that carried over the growing laughter, each syllable dripping with condescension. The crowd joined in, their jeers bouncing off the gym's peeling walls, harsh words like "joke," "quit now," and "go home," piercing the air like darts. A farmer in the back row cupped his hands around his mouth, shouting, "You're out of your league, girl," while a group of teenagers near the door snickered, one recording the scene on his phone with a grin. Each insult seemed to strike Sarah, but her expression remained unchanged, a mask of calm that hid the storm within. A fire kindled years ago in the solitude of a basement gym where she'd trained in secret under her father's guidance. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, silence fell, a sudden, almost eerie hush that rippled through the room like a stone dropped into still water. The announcer cleared his throat, his voice dropping to a curious, almost skeptical tone. "And in the blue corner, Sarah Miller." The name hung in the air, met with a collective blink of confusion, followed by a ripple of uneasy laughter. From the shadows at the edge of the ring emerged a small figure, her slight frame barely filling out the oversized fight gear that hung loosely on her shoulders, the blue fabric swaying with each tentative step. At 5 feet tall and weighing no more than 120 pounds, Sarah looked more like a lost spectator than a fighter, her presence an anomaly in a space built for brute strength. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, strands escaping to frame a face that bore no trace of fear, only a quiet intensity in her brown eyes as they swept over the crowd with a steady, unyielding gaze. The spectators exchanged glances, their initial surprise giving way to snickers and muffled laughter. A burly man in the front row, his overall streaked with grease, elbowed his friend, a lanky teenager with a cap pulled low, and muttered, "She's going to get flattened in 5 seconds. Another, a woman with a beer in hand and a cigarette dangling from her lips, chuckled and whispered a bet to her companion, her voice carrying just enough to draw a few more smirks. The odds were clear. No one gave her a chance, and the air thickened with their collective doubt. The jeers faded into a dull hum as Sarah's mind drifted back, the gym blurring into a memory of a different place, a cold, damp basement that smelled of mildew and determination. It was 10 years ago, a chilly autumn evening in the Miller household, where the upstairs buzzed with the humdrum of daily life, but the basement held a sanctuary of its own. The space was cluttered with relics of a bygone era, dusty boxing gloves hanging from rusty nails, a sagging punching bag that swayed with every timid strike, and faded photographs of her father, Michael Miller, pinned to the concrete wall. Michael had been a local legend in his youth, a retired boxer whose hands had once claimed titles in regional circuits. His broad shoulders now stooped from age and arthritis. To Sarah, he was a giant, not in size but in spirit, his voice gentle yet firm as he taught her the basics of the sport during stolen hours after school. "Size doesn't win fights, Sarah," he'd said, tapping her chest with a calloused finger, his eyes crinkling with pride. "It's what's in here that counts." Those lessons were a secret, hidden from her mother, who disapproved of such roughness for a girl, her voice sharp with worry as she called Sarah upstairs for dinner. Sarah remembered the sting of her first punch, the raw ache in her knuckles as they connected with the bag, the sound, a dull thud that echoed in the stillness. Her father had grinned, adjusting her stance, his hands guiding hers with a patience that belied his gruff exterior. But that grin faded 3 years later when cancer stole him away, his hospital bed a stark contrast to the ring where he'd once reigned. The memory of his final words lingered. "Make them see your strength, Sarah," a promise she'd etched into her soul. After his death, she found his old journal beneath a loose floorboard, its pages yellowed and brittle, filled with sketches of moves, notes on footwork, and a single line scrawled in red ink, "Never let them see your weakness." That journal became her compass, guiding her through late-night sessions in a rented basement gym after her barista shifts at the diner. She'd punch until her arms trembled, the bag swinging wildly, her breath fogging in the cold air as she dodged imaginary foes, perfecting an uppercut that felt like an extension of her spirit. No one knew, not her coworkers who teased her quiet demeanor, not her friends who saw only a shy smile, until this night. The crowd's laughter yanked her back to the present, Derek's shadow looming larger as he cracked his neck, oblivious to the storm brewing and the small woman before him. The hook deepened. What drove this unassuming barista to step into such a brutal ring? The bell rang, a sharp clang that silenced the crowd's mockery for a fleeting second, the sound reverberating off the gym's walls like a gunshot. Derek wasted no time, charging forward with the confidence of a predator scenting easy prey, his heavy boots thudding against the canvas. His first punch sliced through the air, a brutal right hook aimed at Sarah's jaw, the whistle of its trajectory audible in the tense silence. But she moved, faster than anyone expected, sidestepping with a grace that belied her size, her body twisting like a dancer, evading a partner's misstep. The crowd gasped, their laughter turning to murmurs as Derek stumbled slightly, caught off balance, his momentum carrying him a step too far. He recovered quickly, planting his feet with a scowl, his grin widening into a predatory smile. "Lucky dodge," he growled, his voice a low rumble that sent a shiver through the onlookers, circling her like a shark sizing up its meal. Sarah said nothing, her breaths steady and measured, her feet dancing in a pattern her father had drilled into her, a rhythm of balance and anticipation, each step a silent testament to her hidden training. She struck back, a quick jab that landed on Derek's shoulder, the impact a mere tap, but enough to widen his eyes with surprise. The gym buzzed with confusion, the air electric with disbelief. How could this frail figure challenge a titan? A woman in the stands dropped her beer, the bottle clattering to the floor, while a teenager near the back whispered to his friend, "Is she for real?" Derek laughed, a deep, mocking sound that rolled over the crowd, and lunged again, this time with a combination of punches. A left jab followed by a right cross, his fists a blur of red leather. Sarah blocked the first with her forearm, the impact sending a jolt up her arm that made her wince. But she held her ground, her stance unshaken. Her counter, a swift hook to his cheek, drew a red welt, the skin splitting slightly under the force, silencing the crowd further. Derek wiped the blood with the back of his glove, his smirk fading into a scowl, his eyes narrow. The second round began with the crowd on edge, their bets forgotten as they leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected duel, their breaths held in a collective hush. Derek's patience snapped, his frustration boiling over as he roared, a primal sound that shook the rafters and charged with a whirlwind of fury. His fists flew, a devastating uppercut aimed to end the fight, the air whistling with its power. Sarah ducked low, her body bending like a reed in the wind, avoiding the blow with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. Her movements a blur of blue against the red of the ring. The move was seamless, a dance step honed in the shadows of her basement training. And it left Derek overextended, his momentum carrying him forward into empty space. The gym held its breath, the silence thick enough to cut. As she rose, her father's voice echoing in her ears. Use their strength against them. The words were a mantra, a lifeline, and with a pivot she unleashed the uppercut. Her father's move, her small fist connecting with Derek's chin with a crack that reverberated through the stillness like thunder. Time slowed to a crawl. Derek's eyes rolled back, the whites flashing briefly before his massive frame teetered, then crashed to the mat, unconscious before the dust settled around him. The referee froze, his whistle dangling, unused, then waved his arms with a shout, declaring Sarah the winner. The crowd exploded, half in shock, their jaws dropping in unison, half in awe, their cheers a tidal wave that drowned out the earlier jeers, the sound bouncing off the walls in a chaotic symphony. A farmer in the stands threw his hat into the air while a teenager near the door whooped, his phone still recording. Sarah stood over her fallen opponent, her chest heaving with each labored breath. Her face a mask of quiet triumph, the sweat glistening on her brow like a crown. The secret was out. The small woman wasn't just a survivor. She was a force, a revelation that hung in the air like a challenge. The hook reached its peak. How had this unassuming figure mastered such power? And what would she do next? As medics rushed to Derek's side, their footsteps a hurried rhythm on the canvas, the camera phones captured Sarah raising a gloved hand, her gesture modest yet defiant, a silent declaration of victory. The video hit the internet within hours, uploaded by the teenager near the door, the title, Small Woman, Floor's Giant, trending across platforms by midnight. Comments flooded in, a mix of praise for her skill, awe at her courage, and disbelief from those who'd witnessed the fight live. Unbelievable, one user wrote, while another posted, This is what strength looks like. Back in the gym, she slipped out quietly, avoiding the spotlight that now sought her, her footsteps fading into the night. But the damage was done. Her story spread like wildfire, inspiring a teenager in Ohio to lace up his first pair of gloves, a mother in Texas to defy her critics with a newfound resolve, a ripple effect of quiet strength that crossed state lines. Days later, Sarah opened a gym of her own in Willow Creek, a modest space with a hand-painted sign reading "Strength Within" above the door. The room filled with underdogs, kids too small for school sports, women seeking confidence, men with stories of their own. Each punch against the bags a testament to her victory. The fighter had laughed, his arrogance a memory now buried under the mat, but the small woman had floored him, and in doing so she floored the world's expectations, planting a seed of inspiration that would grow beyond the ring. The hook lingered. What other secrets might this quiet hero hold?